This story is based on official reports and eyewitness accounts. And this is the story of Armavia Flight 967. On May 3, 2006, Armavia Airlines was an airline based in Armenia, and Armavia Flight 967 is currently en route from Bardakcı Airport in Armenia to Sochi, a coastal resort city located on the Black Sea in Russia. The flight is being conducted using an Airbus A320-200 aircraft that is approximately 10 years old, with the registration code Echo Kilo 32009. The airplane departing from Armenia would pass over the Black Sea and ultimately land in Russian territory. Shortly after takeoff, the plane swiftly ascended to its designated cruising altitude of 34,000 feet and began its journey over the Black Sea. Commanding Flight 967 is Captain Gregor Grigorian, a seasoned pilot with 20 years of experience in aviation. At 40 years old, Captain Gregor, who has previously flown various Russian-made aircraft, has accumulated a total of 5,500 flight hours. Approximately 2 years ago, he began operating A320 aircraft. Armenian, a relatively young pilot compared to the captain, occupied the right seat beside Captain Gregor. Armen has a total flying time of 2,200 hours. The aircraft in Armenia accommodated a total of 113 individuals, consisting of 99 adult passengers, 5 children, a baby, and 8 cabin crew members. Flight 967 is currently nearing Sochi International Airport in Russia. The initial communication between the Sochi approach controller and the flight's crew occurs at 2110. From 2110 to 2117, the controller and the crew engage in a discussion regarding the current and anticipated weather conditions. Based on their conversation, the captain makes the initial decision to return to Yerevan. However, after the decision has been made, the crew inquires about the most recent observed weather from the controller. At 2130, the controller relays to the crew that visibility is now at 3,600 meters, with a cloud base situated at 500 feet. Unfortunately, the weather ahead was not going to improve but instead worsen. Just 1 minute later, the crew decides to proceed with the flight and continue towards Sochi Airport. After approximately 30 minutes, the A320 aircraft begins its descent, reaching an altitude of 10,000 feet, with its movement being monitored by the Sochi radar. Then, the approach controller authorizes the flight to descend to 6,000 feet and provides a weather update for Sochi, specifically for runway 06, which meets the minimum requirements for the aerodrome. Subsequently, the crew is handed over to the holding and tower controllers, receiving clearance for further descent to 2,000 feet prior to initiating the final approach turn. While banking for the final approach, rain begins, causing an emotional reaction from the first officer, expressed with an exclamation. 7 minutes later, the Sochi controller updates the crew on the weather, reporting a visibility of 4,000 meters and a cloud base at 500 feet. Upon learning about the deteriorating weather conditions, the crew reacts with an excessive and negative response, including the use of expletives. The pilots engage in a 3-minute discussion, expressing frustration about the controller's actions and even resorting to swearing, interrupting their checklist process. During level flight at 2208, the captain decides to extend the flaps, while the crew simultaneously extends the landing gear. At 2210, the crew informs air traffic control that they are ready to land. In response, air traffic control advises the crew that they are 6.2 miles from the airport and provides the weather conditions. Visibility of 4 kilometers with a cloud base at 600 feet. Air traffic control also clears the flight for landing. However, the weather takes a rapid turn for the worse. Just 30 seconds later, the controller informs the crew that the cloud base has descended to 300 feet. Consequently, the controller instructs the flight to abort the approach and directs the crew to execute a climbing right-hand turn to reach an altitude of 2,000 feet. In response, the crew initiates the climb, and the first officer adjusts the thrust levers to the climb position. However, despite the controller's instructions, the flaps, slats, and landing gear remain fully extended. Let's take a short break. We've put a lot of effort into this video, and if you find it useful and informative, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button. Your support helps us bring you more content. Within a few seconds, the speed warning alarm is triggered. This warning notifies the crew that the aircraft's energy is depleting to a critical level, requiring an increase in engine thrust to regain a positive flight path angle. In response to the situation, the crew proceeds to press the toga button, activating the autopilot auto throttle to engage takeoff or go-around thrust. Subsequently, both pilots decide to disengage the autopilot, as they had expressed doubts about its functionality earlier in the flight. In fact, during the cruise stage, the first officer had jokingly commented on the autopilot, suggesting that the captain's autopilot performed better than himself, implying their suspicion of its reliability. As the captain initiates a banking maneuver to the right, both crew members experience heightened physical and emotional stress, resulting in increasingly elevated intonations. As the situation unfolds, one of the crew members unnecessarily applies pressure on the rudder pedals, causing the rudder to deflect. At this point, the aircraft is traveling at an excessive speed that could potentially lead to the flaps being torn apart and a potential crash. The aircraft continues to bank to the right. Subsequently, Flight 967 enters a nose-down attitude, and the flaps retract to 18 degrees. The captain further exacerbates the situation by inputting an 11-degree nose-down command, resulting in a further descent. Additionally, the captain initiates a right bank input, causing the aircraft to bank severely to the right with a roll angle of 39 degrees. At this critical moment, the ground proximity warning system is activated. The first officer intervenes by moving the control stick to the left, attempting to counteract the excessive right bank. However, the captain persists in making control inputs that intensify the right bank. The crew desperately tries to lift the aircraft, but tragically, the plane impacts the water at a speed of 285 knots. Armavia Flight 967 crashed into the water at 22:13 while attempting to perform a go-around after its initial approach to Sochi Airport. The impact caused the aircraft to break up and sink to a depth of 700 meters. Shortly after the crash, the emergency locator transmitter radio beacon signals were activated. The French Transportation Safety Board recovered both the submerged cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder from the Black Sea for examination. Initial findings from the examination indicate that the flight was uneventful until the approach phase. The BA also observed that neither pilot had a clear understanding of how the autopilot of the Airbus A320 operates. Analysis of the internal communications during this phase of the flight reveals that the captain was frustrated because the descent rate in the managed mode was not as high as he had anticipated. The investigators from BA noted that in this mode, the descent rate is automatically calculated based on various parameters that describe the descent process. The investigation revealed that the captain didn't fully understand how the autopilot worked during descent mode. This lack of understanding, combined with potential high stress and urgency to land in Sochi, led to frustration and discrepancies between the captain's expectations and the autopilot's performance. The investigation revealed that the crew might have experienced a somatogravic illusion, which can make them feel like the aircraft is pitching up when it's not. This illusion is more likely to occur during nighttime flights when visual references are limited. The crew's failure to monitor the flight indicators worsened the situation. In the aircraft's final moments, the captain continued banking to the right, and the first officer attempted to counteract it by moving the controls to the left. However, both pilots were unintentionally giving inputs simultaneously, which is not allowed. Although a warning should have alerted them, it had a lower priority than the ground proximity warning, so they were unaware of their conflicting actions. The crash of Armavia Flight 967 happened when the aircraft descended into the water during a climbing maneuver after an unsuccessful approach to Sochi Airport at night. The captain, who was under significant emotional stress, made incorrect control inputs that caused the aircraft to lose control and crash. The poor handling of the aircraft in this critical situation led to the tragic outcome. In addition to the captain's inadequate control inputs, the crash of Armavia Flight 967 was also influenced by the first officer's failure to monitor the aircraft's pitch attitude, altitude, and vertical speed. Furthermore, the crew did not respond appropriately to ground proximity warning system alerts. In remembrance of the 113 individuals who tragically lost their lives in the Flight 967 disaster, we honor their memory.